The air was heavy with the scent of earth and stone as Meles led me through the brittle remains of a once great city. The ruins stretched before us like the bones of a fallen giant, their jagged silhouettes etched against the fading light of dusk. Towering pillars, cracked and weather-worn, rose from the ground, their surfaces carved with intricate runes that pulsed faintly with an ancient, lingering magic. I could feel the hum beneath my feet, a subtle vibration that seemed to echo the melody I had come to know so intimately yet hear. It was muted, a ghost of what had once been. Meles moved with a serene grace, her silver hair catching the dying light like threads of starlight woven into the night. Her eyes, deep and shimmering, were fixed on the runes as if drawing secrets from their very essence. "This is where the song began," she whispered, her voice a soft murmur that seemed to blend with the whispering wind. "And where it ended." I stepped closer to a towering pillar, tracing the faded carvings with a trembling hand. The symbols formed a language lost to all but a few, an ancient tongue woven into the very fabric of the tune I had dared to master. As I studied the inscriptions, a tapestry of images emerged, a civilization vibrant and alive, their faces alight with joy as they played their instruments in harmonious communion with the world around them. The murals depicted grand celebrations, the air thick with music that seemed almost tangible, flowing like a river of light. But interwoven with the beauty were darker scene shadows creeping over the faces, instruments shattering and figures collapsing in despair. The melody that once brought life now bore a curse that unraveled their existence. Malice's fingers traced a mural depicting a great tower, its spires twisting and breaking as a wave of silence swept over the city, smothering its song. They sought to bind magic and music into a single force, Malice explained, her voice tinged with sorrow. But in their pride, they forgot the cost. The tune's power demanded sacrifice, balance that once broken turned creation to ruin. I felt a cold shiver pass through me. The very tune I wielded was a fragment of this lost history, a relic of hubris and downfall. Each note I played was a thread woven into the same tapestry, a dance on the edge of destruction. As I read aloud the inscriptions, the ancient words resonated in the air, their sound vibrating against the stones like a mournful echo. The language was fragile, delicate as a spider's web, its meaning slipping through the grasp of time. But in these ruins, the truth was clear. Power demanded a price, and the song that promised dominion could just as easily herald oblivion. Night fell swiftly, and we lit torches that cast flickering shadows across the cracked stones. The ruins seemed to breathe around us, alive with memories of laughter and loss. I felt the tune's curse stir within me, a tightening coil of cold fire in my chest. Meles placed a steady hand on my shoulder, her touch grounding me amid the rising tide of despair. "You must tread carefully, Eryndor," she said, her eyes reflecting the torchlight. "The path ahead is fraught with peril, but understanding the past is the first step toward shaping a different future." I nodded, swallowing the lump of fear that tightened my throat. The haunting melody of the ruins echoed in my mind, a refrain of sorrow and warning that would not be silenced. In this place of echoes and shadows, I glimpsed the true cost of the power I sought hand, the sacrifice it would demand. The night deepened, and the ruins whispered their secrets beneath the stars. As I prepared to leave, a final thought lingered. Could I rewrite the song of fate, or was I destined to become just another note lost to time? The answer lay hidden in the fragile language of the ancients, waiting to be found or forgotten once more. With a heavy heart and a mind ablaze with newfound knowledge, I stepped away from the ruins, the melody of the forgotten tune ringing in my ears like a haunting dirge. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The song I carried was more than magic. It was a legacy of power, sacrifice, and the delicate balance between creation and ruin. And to master it, I would need to understand not only its melody, but the silence it could bring. The tavern's warmth felt like a fragile shield against the chill that gnawed at my core. I sat at the farthest corner, fingers casually tracing the rim of my mug, though my mind raced with unease. Chauvan had been my confidant for months now, a shadow in the courts, a man whose quick wit and sharper tongue had often steadied my faltering steps. Yet, tonight, beneath the flickering lantern light, a different man sat across from me, one whose eyes darted furtively, betraying secrets far darker than the whispered gossip of court intrigue. His voice was low, almost a hiss, as he leaned closer. "The king grows restless," he muttered, eyes flickering to the darkened doorway. "Your tune unsettles him more than he admits." I nodded, wary. "And you? Where do your loyalties lie, Chauvan?" A shadow passed over his face, a brief flicker too fast for untrained eyes to catch. "With whoever holds the strings of power." The words settled like a stone in my stomach. I wanted to believe him, had to, for the sake of our fragile alliance. But the gnawing distrust that had been growing inside me for weeks now bloomed into something darker. Days later, we rode through the forest's embrace under a silvered moon. The world hushed, save for the whisper of leaves and the soft crunch of hooves on the leaf-strewn path. Leora rode beside me, ever vigilant, her keen green eyes scanning the shadows that danced among the trees. I tried to steady my breath, but the weight of that night's suspicion pressed heavily on my chest. Suddenly, the silence shattered. Figures burst from the darkness, blades glinting wickedly in the moonlight. The ambush was swift and brutal. Leora's sword sang through the air, a fierce symphony of steel and grit, but the numbers were overwhelming. Pain blossomed like wildfire as a blade found its mark, burning through flesh and bone. I fell to the earth, the cold soil pressing against my cheek, mingling with the coppery taste of my own blood. Leora fought fiercely at my side, her voice a fierce promise and a desperate plea as she drove our attackers back. The night echoed with the clash of battle and the ragged gasps of survival. When the last assailant fled, leaving only echoes behind, Leora knelt beside me, her hands trembling yet steady as she pressed a cloth to my wound. "You must hold on," she whispered, eyes gleaming with fierce determination. "We will find who did this." Days passed in a blur of fevered dreams and whispered fears. When my strength returned enough to question, it was not the blade's pain that haunted me, but the betrayal that had brought it. Jorvan's face haunted every shadow, every whispered doubt. I confronted him in a dim chamber heavy with the scent of burning wax and old parchment. The flickering candle cast shadows that seemed to dance with the ghosts of trust broken. His eyes held no remorse, only cold calculation. "You were always a pawn," I said, voice barely steady. "Why?" A bitter smile curled his lips. "Because power demands sacrifices, Eryndor, and you were too naive to see it coming." The truth, sharp and unforgiving, cut deeper than any blade. In that moment, I realized the tune's greatest curse was not just the toll it took on my body, but the isolation it carved around my soul. Trust was a fragile melody, easily broken, and enemies wore the faces of friends. As I lay back against the cold stone wall, the shadows closing in, I understood this. The path ahead was lonelier than I had ever imagined. Yet the song was not over. It was just the beginning of a darker refrain. The court was no longer a place of song and subtle influence, but a battlefield where every note might be my last. and I had to learn anew who I could trust and how to survive the dangerous dance between melody and betrayal. With every heartbeat, the forgotten tune whispered its deadly promise, and I would have to answer. But the question that burned in my mind was clear: how long before the music silenced me forever? The answer lay hidden in the shadows yet to come. And so, beneath the cold gaze of the moon, I vowed to meet the darkness with the only weapon I had left: my music, raw and unyielding, a defiant song against the silence of betrayal. The game had changed, and I would have to play it better than ever before. The city buzzed with an almost unbearable intensity as preparations for the grand summit reached their peak. From my vantage point, atop the stone balcony of the inn where I had taken temporary refuge, I could see the narrow streets lined with banners bearing the sigils of kingdoms near and far, fluttering in the brisk autumn wind like restless spirits. Music floated through the air, the soft plucking of lutes, the crisp tapping of tambourines, the low hum of voices practicing whispered spells woven into song. It was here, in this fragile convergence of sound and silence, that the fate of the realm would be decided. Leora was already by my side, her gaze sharp and unyielding as she scanned the horizon. "The kings will not come without their guards," she murmured, the weight of her words settling like stone in my chest. "And each guard is a shadow with a blade, waiting for the right moment to strike." I nodded, feeling the familiar tightening in my throat that came with the knowledge that trust was a currency far scarcer than gold in these halls. The forgotten tune, my burden and my weapon, throbbed in my veins, a melody half remembered and wholly dangerous. With every note I had played, I felt my life ebbing away, the music a double-edged sword slicing deeper with each performance. "We cannot afford to show weakness," Leora continued, her voice low but firm. "But we must also be careful not to become the very thing we seek to oppose." Her words echoed my own fears. The power the tune granted was intoxicating, yes, but it was also a poison slowly coursing through my veins. I had glimpsed what unfettered ambition could unleash, the ruin of a vanished civilization whispered through the ancient texts. Meles had helped me uncover. Their downfall was a somber refrain that haunted every chord I struck. The days leading to the summit were a relentless tide of meetings and whispered conversations. Queen Isilda, ever the master of diplomacy, extended cautious support, offering sanctuary and resources while her eyes betrayed the calculation behind her smile. Her court was a tapestry of ambition and fear, a delicate dance where one wrong step could unravel alliances and ignite wars. In the gilded halls where I found myself more than once, I sensed the undercurrent of mistrust. Talon, my rival bard, prowled these same corridors, his envy a palpable tension that threatened to snap at any moment. His attempts to undermine me grew bolder, each public challenge a gambit to expose my vulnerabilities and claim the tune's power for himself. I found solace only in moments stolen away from the scheming courts in the quiet garden behind the inn, where the moon cast silver light upon dew-kissed leaves. There, I would cradle my lute and coax the forgotten melody from its strings, each note a bittersweet whisper that wound tightly around my heart. The tune sang of fate and free will, of sacrifice and dominion, binding me to a destiny I both embraced and feared. Meles visited often during these days, her ethereal presence a balm to my fraying resolve. She spoke in riddles, hinting at a way to unravel the curse that clung to the melody, but the price was steep. Her warnings weighed heavily. The power to change the world was entwined with the risk of destroying it. As the summit drew closer, the tension among the kingdoms became a palpable force. Messengers arrived bearing news of shifting allegiances and secret pacts. The air was thick with the scent of spiced wine and polished wood, the clatter of armored guards punctuating the murmurs of nobles plotting beneath crystal chandeliers. One evening, as I stood among the gathered lords and ladies, the weight of their eyes upon me, I felt the full burden of my choice. Could I unleash the forgotten tune's full power and bend these kings to a new order, or would that path only lead to ruin? Was there another way, a quieter harmony that could bind us all without breaking me in the process? Leora's steady hand on my shoulder brought me back from the precipice of doubt. "We must be the balance," she said softly, "not the storm." The gathering storm loomed, fierce and unrelenting. The summit would be a crucible, testing not only the power of the forgotten tune, but the very heart of the man who wielded it. As the first notes of the melody stirred in my soul, I knew that the dance of fate and music was about to reach its crescendo, and that my choice would echo through the ages, a refrain of hope or despair. With a final glance toward the horizon where banners fluttered beneath an ominous sky, I tightened my grip on my lute. The time for hesitation had passed. The music was calling, and I must answer. But in what key would the world sing when the last note faded into silence? The night deepened around me, thick with promises and threats alike. Somewhere beyond the city walls, King Maldron's shadow stretched long and dark, his twisted crown gleaming like a curse. The summit awaited, and with it the fate of all who dared to play the forgotten tune. And so, beneath the watchful eyes of stars and sentinels, I stepped forward into the gathering storm, a bard poised on the edge of destiny, where every note could either bind or break the fragile harmony of a world balanced on melody and magic. The torchlight flickered unevenly against the cold stone walls of King Maldron's war chamber, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to dance with a sinister life of their own. At the heart of the room, seated upon a throne carved from blackened iron and bone, Maldron's gaze was sharp and unyielding. His twisted iron crown caught the light with a dull gleam, jagged spikes resembling the cruel melodies he sought to master. The scar that ran diagonally across his cheek was a harsh reminder of the battles he had survived, battles that had only hardened his insatiable hunger for control. "The bard's influence grows like a poison," Maldron said, his voice low and edged with cold fury. "We cannot allow his melody to unsettle the balance of power any longer. Send forth the elite guard. Let them silence his song at its source." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of magic emanating from the runes etched into the armor of the elite guard captain standing before the king. Clad in dark, rune-inscribed plate armor that seemed to absorb the very light around them, the captain nodded once, a grim affirmation. "They will move under cover of night, my lord. The suppression magic will weaken his hold and sever his influence." Outside the chamber, the city lay cloaked in a thickening dusk. Eryndor sat alone in his chamber, the dim glow from a single candle casting a wavering light over the strings of his lute. His fingers traced the worn wood absently, humming softly the haunting fragments of the forbidden tune. Each note seemed to draw a shadow closer, a weight settling deep in his bones. He was acutely aware of the danger closing in, the oppressive presence of Maldron's will like a tightening noose. Leora stood silently behind him, her eyes sharp and alert. Her auburn hair braided tightly to keep it from obscuring her vision. She radiated a calm strength that belied the storm gathering beyond their walls. "They are coming," she said softly, her voice steady but resolute. "You must be ready." Eryndor swallowed the lump in his throat, feeling the familiar ache in his chest, the bitter price of the tune's power. "I am not sure how much longer I can hold on," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I play, it drains more than just my strength. It twists the very threads of my fate." Leora stepped forward, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Then we fight smarter, not harder. We use what we've learned. The tune's power is not just in the notes, but in the silence between them. As night deepened, the elite guard moved like shadows through the cobblestone streets. Their presence was a silent threat, the runes on their armor flickering with a cold, suppressive magic that sought to unravel the delicate harmonies Eryndor had woven. Whispers of their approach spread through the city's alleys and corridors, sowing fear in the hearts of those who believed in the bard's cause. Eryndor and Leora worked tirelessly, preparing defenses not just of steel and blade, but of song and silence. The bard's fingers trembled as he practiced the tune, each note a fragile thread in the tapestry of resistance. Melis's cryptic guidance echoed in his mind, a reminder that the true power lay not in domination, but in balance. The air grew thick with tension as the first clash of wills began beneath the shroud of night. Maldrin's shadow crept ever closer, but Eryndor's resolve burned brighter, even as the melody threatened to consume him. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only the strength of the forgotten tune, but the very soul of the land itself. In the depths of the castle, Maldrin watched the unfolding events with cold satisfaction. "Let the bard come," he murmured. "Let him play his song. I will drown it in iron and fire." But as the night wore on, even the king could not ignore the subtle shifts, the unexpected resilience of a melody that refused to be silenced, and the fragile hope that still flickered within the heart of the bard who dared to wield it. And so, beneath the heavy cloak of shadows and steel, the deadly dance of melody and fate began anew, each note a step closer to either dominion or ruin. The chamber was thick with the fading echoes of applause, the lingering warmth of candlelight barely reaching the corners where shadows lengthened like dark fingers. I staggered off the stage, my limbs trembling beneath the weight of the melody I had just unleashed. Each note had clawed at the air, weaving its ancient spell, but the price was carved into my flesh, as tangible as the lute still trembling in my grasp. Leora was there the moment I faltered, her keen green eyes narrowing with alarm as she caught me before I could crumple to the floor. "Eryndor," she whispered, her voice a tether pulling me back from the abyss. "You're pushing too hard." I forced a breath, tasting iron and dust in my mouth. I must if I hesitate now, the chance slips away. Her fingers pressed firmly against my shoulder, grounding me in the reality I was desperate to evade. "This tune is killing you. I've seen the pallor, the way your breath shortens. You're fading like a dying string." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Then let it fade, but not before I've played my part." She pulled me toward the quiet sanctuary of a small chamber behind the hall, where the flicker of candlelight cast dancing patterns on the worn wooden walls. I sank onto a wooden stool, my body protesting with every movement. Leora knelt beside me, her hands surprisingly gentle as she examined my trembling fingers. The numbness was spreading, creeping like a shadow across my limbs. "You're pushing the melody too far," she murmured, eyes scanning my pale skin. "Each performance drains you more than the last." I closed my eyes, the haunting refrain of the forgotten tune still echoing behind my eyelids. It's more than music now. It's a thread in the fabric of fate. To unravel, it means losing everything. Her expression softened, but a steel edge remained. "And what of your life? What of the man behind the music?" I wanted to believe I was stronger than this curse, that my determination could outmatch the ancient magic embedded in the lost language of the tune. But the truth was undeniable. My body was failing. My breath came in ragged gasps, my vision blurred at the edges with shadows that whispered of oblivion. Days blurred into nights as I retreated into solitary practice, the lute my only companion. The melody clung to my mind like a shroud, its notes a bittersweet poison that both sustained and destroyed me. I could feel the life draining from my veins with every chord, yet the power it granted was intoxicating beyond measure. Leora's presence was a constant balm and a reminder of the fragile line I walked. She watched over me with fierce loyalty, her pragmatism grounding my spiraling obsession. "You need to rest," she urged one evening, her voice low but resolute. "Without strength, the tune will consume you faster than you can imagine." I shook my head, the shadows in my eyes deepening. "If I stop now, all will be lost. The chords will tear each other apart. I have to keep playing." Her hands clenched into fists, a silent battle raging in her gaze. "And what of the cost? How many more pieces of yourself will you sacrifice to this melody?" My fingers brushed the lute strings, a whisper of the tune escaping my lips despite the weariness that threatened to silence me. The haunting desperation that had driven me from the start now wrapped around my heart like a tightening noose. In the stillness of the night, I felt the melody twist within me, a deadly dance of power and ruin. The strings of my fate frayed with every note, the price of dominion etched in fading strings of my own life. But in that fragile moment between sound and silence, I wondered how long before the music would silence me forever. The chamber grew cold as the candle guttered, the final note hanging in the air like a fragile promise or a whispered curse. And I, Eryndor, bard of the forgotten tune, stood at the precipice of a fate I could neither control nor escape. The music would not wait for me to be ready, neither would the consequences.